Welcome everyone, my name is Leanne Maguire, I'm the Chair of Glasgow City Parents Group, and tonight we are hosting our Q&A with Maureen McKenna from Education Services. So on the call this evening we have obviously Director of Education Maureen McKenna, and we've got Kimberly Cannon and Martina Johnson-Gray from Glasgow City Parents Group. I am just hosting the evening and just going through the introductions. Then I'll be turning my own video off, and Kimberly and Martina will be putting forward the questions to Maureen. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Maureen for attending tonight, and thank you to Kimberly and Martina for putting forward all the questions that were submitted. And thank you to all the families across Glasgow that did submit questions. We had around 100 submissions, which we have tried to kind of cut down and condense, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can tonight. Any questions that we don't cover, we'll try and get some answers on a frequently asked questions paper and get that out to you. So if I can just remind everyone what we'd asked the parents and carers was that now the schools are back, what are your two top burning questions? And that's basically the submissions that the girls are going to be putting forward to Maureen this evening. So if I can just ask Kimberly to start with her questions, and I'm going to just take my video off the screen.
Brilliant, thanks Leanne. So now that the schools are back, Maureen, Glasgow City Parents Group have continued to receive some concerns obviously with families round about the risk infection control, and we've got some questions that kind of lead on from that. So our first one is, why are face coverings not mandatory in schools, and are the education services able to do anything to enforce adults to wear them in and around the school?
Okay,
obviously, I think mean playgrounds and things.
Good starting question. So I suppose it's a little bit of clarification. Are you meaning face coverings for adults only, as opposed to face coverings for children?
Yeah, so like when adults are dropping off, picking up, and if they have to go into the school playground for any other reason.
Yeah. Okay, so adults should still be maintaining good physical distancing. They shouldn't be gathering in crowds outside school gates, and we know that there have been some teething problems from a number of our schools where there've been new processes have been introduced, where gates have been opened up, and I've received some emails from members of the public a little bit concerned about the lack of physical distancing. And we understand that parents are quite anxious and they want to be there to collect their child. And a lot of the schools have revisited their plans. And I know one school where I spoke to the head teacher, and she said they were on their fourth plan, trying to manage, because every site is different, and they're just trying to make it work as best as possible, but it needs parents' cooperation too.
Absolutely.
And we cannot mandate face coverings for adults out in the community. You know, face coverings are not needed when you're outside. You know, we've heard from scientists that the risk of transmission, if you're outside in the fresh air, is pretty low, but you still have to maintain your physical distancing. And parents need to really think about that community transmission and remember that they are the role models for their children. So, you know, for all of you who are listening to this, we're asking for your cooperation around as we get more and more used to this new way of working. And by all means, wear face coverings, but we cannot police that. We cannot mandate it. We are just asking for your help in being a good role model for your children and looking after each other by maintaining that social distancing, please.
Amazing, thank you. So our next one on this subject is, what is the current cleaning routine for schools, and are they getting enhanced cleaning measures in place at the moment?
So we worked really hard on this over the summer, and we worked with our cleaning colleagues in PALS, it's called Property and Land Services, and we also worked very closely with the trade unions on this, because obviously it was a very important topic for them. So there was an analysis done in all the schools of what cleaning was available and what we felt was needed more. There has been a 46% increase in the amount of cleaning hours available. We have been able to create a range of new employment opportunities, actually for up to 200 people, which I think is fantastic news given the pressure that I know families have been under. So existing cleaning staff were given the option of additional hours, and they also went out and over the summertime did a lot of recruitment. So every school and nursery now has a day cleaning service. That doesn't mean that there is a cleaner in their school all day, but during the day there is a service of additional hours, and those cleaners have got a cleaning regime that talks about touch points, so where people are more likely to be, you know, putting their hands, and they are doing that, so more regular cleaning of the toilets, doors, handles. But we're also asking teachers to teach with their doors open. And there's two reasons for that. One, to reduce the kind of wee hands on the handles the whole time, but also to improve ventilation. Because the scientists have also told us that our rooms should be well ventilated. So windows open, even if it's just a little bit of the window open, but with the door open, you're getting that better ventilation through. So I think that the good news is 46% increase in cleaning available.
No, that's really good. Again on this one, so just what is the policy for school closures if there is suspected symptoms within a group, or if there's positive cases within the school? So I think obviously we've seen a few in the media, and not all reports are true, as we're well aware. But I know there's been a few, especially the last few days.
At this, yeah. So here we are, week 1 in, and I think we're still learning. So these decisions are public health led. So public health have a process in place, and I have been on the phone to the Director of Public Health now, from not having spoken to her for ages. We are now best friends because I'm back and forth on the phone because I need to learn more about their processes, about their letters, and I think and this was tonight's conversation at 6 o'clock with her, is that we need to communicate better with our parents and with our head teachers about the process. So until this started, I had no idea what the public health process was. I just knew that it would be public health led and that there would be letters that go out from public health. And I think it's really important that the letters come from public health, that it is a health-led approach so that we take the advice from them. And so I think we need to do a bit of work on the letters that are going out so that they are a bit more geared towards our parents. So there's been some confusion, for example, they give an example of a class in a school. So our child has tested positive, is not in school because the parent has been great and has kept that child off. But that child's test comes through, and they're coming through much quicker now, comes through positive. The test and protect scheme kicks in, and they contact the parents. But they've been busy. They've been very busy. So we've had some parents not called until late on in the evening. And late on in the evening to say, your child has been in a class with a young person who has tested positive. We don't think that, you know, the risk is relatively low, but as a precaution, we would like your class to stay at home for the next 14 days. So the parents are getting no advanced warning effectively. And we know that's very challenging for families. I also am very keen that we click on into learning so that parents feel confident. So in one of the schools today that's been reported in the media, the school was brilliant. it's 9-year-olds, and iPads have been issued to all the children in the class. That's gone out. The teachers went out from school and delivered them. The teacher also has to stay at home, and she's going to lead some online lessons in using Seesaw and Showbie with the class. So that's a really good example where we're going to test out that learning continuing for the next 14 days. But I'm going to meet with the Director of Public Health next week, because I think we need to get a kind of a little pack. Look, this is what happens. This is how it shakes out. This is how it works. We can't keep up with the communication. So I've got elected members saying, why didn't I know? I've got parents saying, but I didn't get that. I didn't get that message. They phoned, a Test and Protect phoned and left a voicemail, and then they're turning up at school the next morning, and it's the school is having to deal with all that emotion at the school gate. Really challenging territory. And I think if we were more open and transparent with parents to say, this might happen, here's what you need to think about, and calm it all down, because you know, it's a really anxious time, but we know that the children, although we've got more children having COVID, it's because we're all testing. So tests are much more available. We're all being encouraged to test. So in the last 5 months, I don't believe that there weren't a number of children who had COVID, but they're mild symptoms. You know, in the main, our children display incredibly, so it looks like a bit like a cold, but it's a persistent high temperature, and sometimes a cough, sometimes not a cough. And then, you know, I have 3 children, so it's 2 spoonfuls of Calpol.
How many times a year do we get these symptoms normally? That's just a cold and flu season that we would normally see.
Calpol, never leave home without it. Stick it in. But now people are going, so that's what we did in the last 5 months. Now people are going to get tested. And this process kicks in. And I do have to confess to being slightly concerned how many classes we're sending home. But I have to, let's get back to, in perspective, there's 68,500 children in our schools. And at the moment, today, for example, there is at most 50 children, including the northeast, plus the school in the south, children who are self-isolating with no symptoms. So that means that 68,450 children are in our schools learning happily, jollily. So although we've got the media telling us about these, they need to calm it down too.
Absolutely.
And we need to move this into business as usual until this vaccine becomes available and we're able to try and manage this virus a little bit better. So I knew the first few weeks was going to be a bit bumpy. I think the public health thing, we need to work, and I have to say, Linda de Castica, the Director of Public Health, is hugely positive, hugely supportive of the need to work with our parent community to make sure that people are not unnecessarily anxious, and that we get that much better open and transparent approach. So I'm hoping to get the kind of suite of letters out, the kind of advice, and let's get that out so that families at least know what to expect. Whereas I think just now it's still a bit scary, isn't it, as to what's going to happen when you get that phone call.
Brilliant. And I've got a kind of 2-in-1 question, so I'll read it and we can reiterate if we need to. So why do senior pupils not need to social distance within school if they're viewed as young adults? And what are we doing to help sort of reassure the families of those kids that maybe fall under that high risk category due to their own sort of health concerns?
So young people are not high risk. The way that it kind of has been explained to me by the scientific advisors is the younger the child, the lower the risk. So in terms of transmission and in terms of the symptoms that they display. And the older the child gets, the higher the risk, but it's nowhere near, I'm a maths teacher, so it's an exponential curve, okay? So that goes like that. So it goes up really steep. So the older you are, when you get to be 60s, 70s, and so on, that's when it is high risk. At the other end, remember that the treatment of this virus is hugely improved. So we have much smaller numbers in hospital, and those that end up there are getting treated much better in terms of the medical interventions being used. So young people are higher risk, but not high risk. We are encouraging social distancing, but it's really hard. These are teenagers. They gravitate to each other. In the summertime, I did some maths teaching out at Castlemilk High, and when I watched the young people out the window as they walked up the road to the school, and they just all, jollily walked along. When we had a break for water and a snack, they moved from social distancing in the classroom, and they just it's like little magnets.
I know, they can't help it.
Little magnets. So I think the issue about face covering is an interesting one, and it's one that's being very lively debated, and I suspect that there will be a changing position coming from government around this. My view is that it shouldn't be mandatory, that it should be encouraged, promoted, about a bit like it is in the shops. Because we do have to remember that for some people, it's just not appropriate. It's not appropriate because of their health condition. It's not appropriate maybe because of maybe they have an additional support need that means they are just a little bit sensory sensitive. And we can't have it becoming a point of conflict in our schools. So, I can't have a teacher. It's a bit like at the supermarket. You might see somebody not wearing a mask, but it is not your business to go over and say to them, oh, who do you think you are? Look at me with my face covering. I'm dead good. Where's yours? Because there's a whole range of reasons for that. And that needs to be within our schools too. And I would hope that if it moves to that's the position that we get to. And also, the scientific evidence around their efficacy is still a bit mixed.
And it's invisible disabilities that we promote out with the pandemic, so I think it's maybe taking us back to that side of it as well.
Completely agree. And also for children learning, they need to see your face. Those visual cues is what they get. So lots to think about in there.
Yep, and just the last one on this wee subject is just, are the schools sort of reaching out just to offer additional support to families that might sort of find themselves in that bracket of being more sensitive to sort of contracting coronavirus and maybe do have further concerns about sending their kids to school?
So early days for me to be able to say definitively about that. What we have said to the schools is that we recognise that some families may be anxious. So as this week progresses, we would be wanting the schools, the pastoral care teachers, to start picking up on who hasn't come to school and start having those discussions about what we could be able to do to support them to come back. And of course, these incidents that happen in other schools, so Bannerman High School, for example, plummeting attendance due to children socialising outside of school. But there's been a big rebound in the school, and the school are working really hard with families to build that confidence back up again.
Okay, brilliant. So pass over to Martina for the next set. You'll be sick of listening to me now.
Not at
Not at all. Thanks, Kimberly. Hi, Maureen. How are you? This is it follows on actually neatly from what Kimberly and you were discussing anyway. Is that obviously we know Glasgow's a nurturing city and education services are part of that as well. And some of these questions focus on if there's a local lockdown or a family has to isolate, what happens there. And some of the stuff you've covered, but the things that we haven't, I think we'll go over that as well. One of the things parents are keen to find out is how many teachers or pupils in a school would need to test positive before that would be a blended learning approach would be taken again. Is there a certain ratio or a certain number that you would think?
So as I've said, it's public health led, and there isn't a number that says. We're looking at it, so that contact tracing is about those contacts, and I think there would have to be a kind of a breakout in the community before we would get to a stage, and we wouldn't be making that decision.
No,
that would be a bigger decision. What we are going to start talking, particularly to our secondary schools, about is about online learning, is that children don't have to learn in a school building.
Sure.
So you might, some of that question, Kimberly, that you had about the senior pupils and the face coverings, well, that wouldn't be needed if the young people were learning at home. And they had their iPads and they could do a call like this on Microsoft Teams and be able, and our schools are already doing that. That happened through lockdown. It was just inconsistent. Not everybody was doing it. So we're accelerating the iPad coming out, but there's no hard and fast rules along that, and it is part of our learning process.
Sure, thank you, Maureen. The second question was then from that is if families have to isolate or there's a lockdown, what's the procedure for home learning? But you're saying as much as possible, pupils will get iPads sent home with them. And I know that you're trying your hardest to get that rollout completed.
Correct. And I think the example at the primary school in the south is a really good one. So for primary school, the iPads are there for primary 6 and primary 7, and then there's class sets. But what we've said is if that primary 4 or 5 has to go home for 2 weeks, then let's take the class set and send them home, because it's just for those 2 weeks. They get the value out of it, they get the use out of it, and then they'll just bring them back to school. Well, they will be duly wiped down.
Of course. And quarantined as well, hopefully. Okay, thank you for that as well. So one of the questions is as well, and it's quite a broad question, but probably things will shoot off of this as well. How did schools minimise disruption for pupils' learning then, if it's a kind of pupils are at home, pupils are at school, pupils are at home?
It's really hard, isn't it? And I think this year is going to be, I can't say, it'll be smooth and tickety-boo. And without a doubt, there will be disrupted learning for the children as this happens, because we know that despite the best efforts, home learning is not the same. That's why I was a huge advocate of getting the children back. But if it's 14 days from when the child was tested or symptomatic, there's a rule about that. But it means that today, for example, if a class was sent home from tomorrow and the child was last in school last Friday, that these 3 days count as part of the 14. So it's right up, and so it would be the 31st of August. So it's not going to be 5 months now. It's going to be shorter chunks of time, and that will make it better. But it would be just so wrong of me to say that it's going to be smooth. Yeah, learning will be
absolutely,
disrupted.
and
to have to do our best. I had one school who practiced last Friday. They actually practiced as part of their phased return in agreement with the parents. They sent everybody home and they did a day home learning with the teacher electronically. Wasn't that clever?
I think that sounds great, and that's what I was just going to say. Perhaps the message for parents is that this may happen, but it won't be for 5 months. Yeah, and to be aware of that as well, and children will get back to school as soon as they can. So that neatly follows on to, if a family decide to keep their child home due to safety concerns, is an additional support available from the school or from the education services?
So I think we would have to look at the individual circumstances there. I mean, we cannot support children to be at home because parents have made that decision. Even in some cases where it might be, you know, for very good reasons, we just don't have the resources to provide that level of individualized support. However, our schools are great, and it may be that they will be able to support, they will know the context of that family. We're also looking, we have children whose learning is disrupted by illness, and we are looking at it, and we do have a kind of a legal duty to support children, and I'm talking about long-term health conditions, cancer children, that kind of thing. And so we're looking at better online digital support for them too.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So what has been learned from the SQA issues or disagreement has been put here as well. So if we enter another lockdown during winter, we don't know, maybe that'll happen as well, and young people were to sit exams in 2021, will that be taken into account, or will there be an opportunity for young people to sit exams social distancing so that they're not missing out and there isn't the same issues that were before?
So there's a consultation out right now by SQA, where they are looking to look at the qualifications, and they are looking at, in many cases, reducing the length of the final exam. Right. My understanding is they're also looking at moving the exam diet down a bit. So instead of starting at the end of April and running from May and into the start of June, they are looking to move it 2 or 3 weeks down. So recognising that there's been some learning missed. And therefore, so they're starting to consider that and to think what the impact would be. And of course, we've all got our fingers and toes crossed that there will be that vaccine, and we'll be in a much better place sometime this year.
Sure, fingers crossed as well. Thank you, Maureen. So this is about digital devices, and as you know, digital devices are very close to my heart, Maureen, because I do IT recycling and everything as well. So it's just, I suppose it's to ensure the best outcome of every child, and you've kind of touched on young person, you've touched on that a bit as well, and are particularly vulnerable families going to be maybe targeted first because they are probably disproportionately affected by the lockdown. We make sure that it's a targeting of resources till we can get everyone what they need.
Correct. So we benefited from the government's IT scheme, and we got 6,900 additional iPads, and we got 300 Chromebooks and 4,000 Wi-Fi thingies.
Dongle, I know what you mean.
It's
MiFi boxes.
MiFi boxes. MiFi boxes. So 4,000 of them. So what we need to do is get a process in place where we start to work with our schools to identify the families, so that we can start that support. We need to give the schools a little bit of time to settle down, and then probably September onwards be starting to look at that analysis to see what we can do. But then we would have access as these classes disappear to be able to provide them with that kind of support. So I mean it is quite positive, but there is a bit of work needing to be done. And we've also got the contract with Remade, that our IT and the council goes to them to be refurbished. And I've also asked if I can, as part of that, get 30 refurbished ones back every year for school leavers going to college or university that are particularly vulnerable.
That's wonderful to hear. That's really, really heartening to hear as well. So last in this section as well, Maureen, and thank you for your answers, they've been great. Will there be extra support or help for kids in mainstream schools but that have additional support needs, and maybe they were behind in the curriculum for whatever reason? Now that they're back again, will they get additional support, and maybe home learning didn't go so well for them, or home learning didn't work for them so much?
So in the recovery plan that we've produced and it's on the web and we've pushed it out, we're calling it Recovery, Resilience and Reconnection. And I redid, with the advice changing on the 30th of July, I redid phase 3 and phase 4. So phase 1 was June, phase 2 was the childcare in the summer, phase 3 was going to be part-time learning, and phase 4 full-time learning. So I changed those to be phase 3 was children returning last week, with that phased return, and then that bit of recovery curriculum. And phase 4 I have described as targeted support to raise attainment, particularly focused on closing the poverty-related attainment gap. But it's really about that targeted support to identify learning loss. And what I've said in that advice is that that phase 4 and phase 3, there's not a time slot where phase 3 stops and phase 4 begins. The idea is phase 3 is, right, you're all back in full time. And then phase 4, with a little bit of settling in, my expectation is that we're starting to target learning. So the plan is that the quality improvement officers come September, once we get into September, should be starting to get out to link with their schools and to start to engage in discussions about what's the targeted support that you're providing. We've got some additional funding for more staff. So we took on about 200 extra teachers, but some of those extra teachers over and above our kind of formula approach to schools, but a lot of those 200 teachers will get mopped up with maternity leaves as they crop up, and long-term ill health. That kind of always over-recruit in the summer, and then by the time we get to October, they've all been used up in the kind of, when you've got 93% workforce that's female, there's quite a few mat leaves out there, so they get kind of used up. So we've said that at the end of August, I'm going to find out where all the additionality is, and then make sure that we, if necessary, recruit more up to the amount of the budget that we've been given. And we've been given about 5 million to spend, which doesn't go very far, I hasten to add, on teachers. But
absolutely, no, yeah. Well, thank you very much. I think it's back to Kimberly again, if that's all right, for the next lot. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, we've got lots of other teachers that we've allocated out to the schools too, that previously would have been doing things like primary 7 swimming. They're all out, English additional language. So we really maximised the support out to schools.
Brilliant. Thank you, Maureen. I really appreciate that. Right, Kimberly, you're up, I think.
Thanks, me. So throughout lockdown, the Glasgow City Parents Group has heard so many different variations of how schools have and haven't, unfortunately, in some cases, communicated. So these questions just sort of follow into the communication of schools moving forward. So since lockdown, what improvements have been made on how communication will be delivered out to families?
So I'm starting to look at West Partnership. That's the 8 local authorities in the West, and we've been working together to develop advice on a localised lockdown. And I have a draft. Alas, I've been so busy dealing with little classes going home, I haven't had time to kind of get to it. And we drew on the advice from your survey, from the Glasgow City Parent Group survey. And you'll know from the outcome of that survey that people welcomed the communication, and in many cases they wanted more, but it was mixed about, should everybody get, should it just be for vulnerable? But then you come out with, well, what's the definition of vulnerable? Actually, you know, I believe that everybody is vulnerable at some point, in the same way that everybody, I think every child has an additional support need at some point in their learner journey, because it may be because of bereavement, it might be a temporary thing, might be because their care experienced, it might be, you know, there's loads of reasons, or I just get stuck writing sentences in English. So I would describe myself as having had an additional support need in English, but maths was very easy for me. So I think that we need to be careful that we don't categorise families, that we just say, well, we're only phoning the vulnerable ones, because actually that vulnerability, I think we all have it. And during that lockdown, what became apparent was that even the most resilient people felt a wee bit vulnerable. And,
Yeah.
and some of the best examples were where our teachers phoned and they spoke to the child. So they spoke to mum, and then or dad or whoever, and then they said, can I speak to James? And they just said, how are you? And it made a huge amount. And I think, you know, some of the loveliest feedback I got from parents was them realising how important school was in the life of their child, that they hadn't quite internalised until we had that dreadful lockdown. So I think we have to be a little bit more direct about that. And one of the difficulties that we had in lockdown was that teachers weren't able to come into school buildings. So what will be better this time will be that they'll be in school buildings. And one of the things I'm going to be following up with the schools that are currently have children who are self-isolating is, are we phoning them? Are we phoning them, even though it's only 14 days, are we phoning them at least twice to say, hi, how are you? How's things? So,
and that really, it makes such a difference.
Yeah.
Just that friendly voice sometimes is what people really miss at the end of it.
Yeah.
So the next one is to create a more consistent approach. Is there going to be standard guidelines for communications with schools and families? And I know Catherine, who's in the background of the call, has actually got a project running at the moment that we've been supporting with. So I know there is a lot going on with that, but maybe if you can just sort of inform parents a wee bit more.
Well, I mean, I suppose it's what you mean, is it's standardised. You know, it's about your local context, isn't it, too? And I think there's always room to improve communication, without a shadow of a doubt. And I'm delighted that the City Parents Group is really leading the way on this and helping us reach out and touch the lives of so many more parents, and we do need to do more of that. Not everybody links via social media, although it does feel like everybody does sometimes. I think that you know, Catherine's work will inform that. The schools need to do that. You know, they need to use the parent body a little bit better, a little bit more. We need to be smarter about that, and I think our schools are naturally doing a huge amount of work reassuring parents. Whether it will be standardised and poly-perfect, oh no, that's a very bold comment to make. I think we will be doing our best with it.
Yeah. And just sort of leading on from that, how is the education service ensuring that communications that come out from other departments, finance, shall we say, as an example, is going to be more easier to sort of understand as parents and have a more sort of consistent approach with falling under how, for example, communication from the education service would come out and it's very parent friendly?
So I think we have oodles of work to do there, don't we? I have seen some of the letters, for example, a few years ago, I started to look at the letters that were being sent out from customer and business services to nursery parents who hadn't paid. And it was horrific, horrific. We were scaring parents. And it was, you know, it was as if you know, somebody was going to come and batter their door and their house was going to be removed because they hadn't paid, you know, the snack money for their child or nursery fees. So I did work with them to get that toned down a little bit, and we need to continue to work on that around clothing grants, around everything else. And our problem just now is that we've only got 25% of our admin staff in, and I know that parents are really frustrated out there at people not picking up the phone, at the kind of inconsistent responses they're getting when they're asking about transport or placing requests or late enrollments or clothing grants, and they are getting frustrated, and I get it. But our admin staff, you know, while the government advice is not to come in to offices and to work from home, You know, I'm in at the office every day and have been for quite a while, but we're just gently bringing people back in, and we are the first big service coming back in. So the timing of offices opening is not matching the service that we need to deliver to parents just now. And that is a source of frustration that I share.
No, completely.
Yes. And I do have to say, they find my email address very rapidly. So we're trying to kind of mop up lots of that. But that is, you know, they have to understand that is why we are where we are with some of those issues. So we're doing our best, and I take the feedback, and we will push more on that about getting more parent-friendly communication. I will feed that back to the Chief Executive.
Thank you. And just on the kind of centralised approach with some things, so things like kids bringing school bags in, being able to fill up water bottles, it seems to vary from school to school. So it was just to see if if we think there should be a better sort of approach to that.
So in the risk assessments, all the schools got the same advice in the risk assessments. Some have opted to interpret that in different ways, and we did have to kind of gently come in when some parents came and said, how's he supposed to take his lunch with him when he's not allowed to take a bag, and he's not allowed to do this, and he's not allowed to do that. So we got that kind of gently fixed. And to be fair to the schools, there was a lot of advice that came out in June that was, you know, when we moved to the blended learning model and it's part-time, you have to kind of hold each child with a stick at 2 meter distance and place them over here, and they, you know, hose them down as they come in and hose them down as they leave. So there was a bit of mixed messaging around that, and we've tried to fix that. The water one, oh my goodness me. I think I've got a throbbing email from a parent about the water one, because an elected member said, so water and access to water, yeah, absolutely human right. However, the risk assessment says that if I come with my bottle and I go to the water cooler and I put my bottle and I fill it up from the water cooler, I have had the lip of that bottle in my mouth. So there could be traces of saliva on that when I do that to the tap, I could cross-contaminate, pass that on to the tap, and then the next person coming along, you could then get, now, it's not hugely high risk, but on the other hand, in the scary world that we're in, that could be a potential, and it's been identified in our risk assessment. A solution for that is use the water cooler. A teacher fills up the jug and then fills up the bottles. In a school of 2,000 children or 1,500 children, that's just not possible.
Everybody needs a drink. As soon as somebody's had a drink, everybody needs a drink. That's what always happens with these things.
It was bring a bottle from home. And I think one of the difficulties we've got with COVID is all that work we've done on environmental friendliness and recycling and everything. And now we're moving to disposable bottles, disposable face coverings. So they can bring in water in a bottle. Tends to be the kind of general rule-ish.
Okay. And just the next one on this, so can schools possibly be encouraged to make better use of their social media? I know some schools are really all over social media, some aren't, it really varies. But particularly at this time, maybe just to help give parents a bit more reassurance that kids are fine. It's just saying that they're there, they're enjoying being back at school, and a lot of them are really settling excellently. So I think some of the schools that maybe are uploading these nice smiley face children pictures are possibly helping to sort of eliminate some of the fears.
Did any of this, have the parents fed back about, I don't know if any of our schools are doing, you know, using these little apps that you get your individual photo back of your child? I don't know.
Right, I've not heard of it.
Okay, So I think what we'll do is what I can take from this is I've got the phone calls for those at home. I've got finances, one of my action points, easier to understand, parent friendly. And I also think a little bit of feedback back to the schools to say parents would really appreciate little bits of reassurance. Some of it might be in the playground, but not everybody uses social media. Not everybody wants their child's photo up.
Yeah.
But are there clever ways that we can send home just maybe once a week a picture of a happy child?
Yeah, just a wee snippet of the, I think parents are very keen, as you say, for standing about the playground and really strive for that information. They just want to see the kids are happy at the end of the day.
Yep.
Okay. And just the very last one on this is there a kind of time frame for if the education services send information to a school that's to be passed on to parents? Is there a timeline, for example, should the school send that out within a day, 2 days, if there's any sort of key updates from the education services?
I tend not to send to schools when it's a kind of a key update to go out to parents. And the reason is that I know that's pretty erratic way to get the information out because, you know, I might say, well, send it out. So I've sent letters, parent letters. So the parent letters that I've written, I try and do a belt and braces. So I send it to the school and I ask them to use group call or you know, whichever way they use to send it out. And they tend to, if it has my name on it, they tend to be really good at sending that out pretty quick. It depends on how many emails are in their inbox. But then I also, I get Fiona Ross, it sounded like I did it, but I don't. I got Fiona Ross to put it up on the website. And then I do the Twitter bit, and then I tweet it out, and we try to do it in a bit belt and braces. So any letters will always be on the website, and we've now got schools and learning, and then under there the top one is recovery, resilience and reconnection. So anything that's going out just now goes out on that. So the last little bit I did on the frequently asked questions with school meals that had caused all the confusion, I put it up there and then tweeted it out, and I get quite a lot of traction for that.
Brilliant. So we're back to you, Martina.
Back to me, back to bad cop. This section is about the adjustments that were made to learning because of COVID and how parents, I think, that might affect their children's learning. Some of them you've actually covered, which is great already. One that's been quite a hot topic, particularly for Kimberley and lots of other schools as well, is about physical education. And one of the things is, what will arrangements be kind of winter time? Will that be taken into account? I know we're obviously really encouraging children to be outside as much as possible, which we always should really anyway, but it's just about some parents being a bit concerned about winter and what adjustments will be made then. So
PE, I am a huge proponent of PE. It's a really essential part of health and well-being, getting our children fit, particularly for those that might have been stuck in a house, up the high flats, through a period of lockdown. You know, real challenge, lack of access. So they're out in the parks now, and that's great. Just now, the advice is that PE should be done outdoors, but come the 14th of September, the hope is that gyms and indoor sports will be able to open. So as part of the government's phasing, that indoors, if gyms are open and indoor sports are open, then you can do indoor PE. And we've also looked at in secondary schools, if you've got a huge games hall and you open the doors, I mean, if you've got a huge, what's the difference in a big games hall, 30 children, and the doors open to have good ventilation? What's the difference between that and being out? You know, it's a big space. It allows the children to move around. I think it's different in primary schools where it's small gyms, more confined spaces. But I have my fingers and toes crossed for the 14th of September.
Excellent. Well, that might partially answer the next question. It's about PE kits, and I know that different schools have got different advice about PE kits. Some schools, Kimberly might agree with me here, are being told to wear, you know, shorts and t-shirt. Others have been told to wear jogging bottoms and on the day of gym or PE. And it's just to get some clarification. Has there been general advice to schools about what should happen, or is it up to schools what they wear?
Up to schools, really. They know their context, you know, so they know what's reasonable to expect from their school community, and you know, whether it's joggy trousers or shorts. And I would assume that they're not, well, I would expect that they are not rigidly applying that.
Okay, thank you. I think outdoor learning again, and I think you've probably partially answered this. I think there's quite a lot of emphasis on outdoor learning and outdoor physical education for primary schools, but it's just to make sure, is there a citywide strategy for high schools to make sure that that's emphasised as well?
So we encourage outdoor learning at all levels, but it is more challenging in a secondary setting where it is subject specific, and where it is, you know, it is much more at a desk and you're learning, and it's quite a direct curriculum. But you would expect science to take the opportunity to go outdoors. Certainly, I know that PE has been done, is being done outdoors in the secondary sector. But I also know that Leanne, we're going to arrange for Neil Whitewick from Blair Vadich and Donnie McLeod. And Donnie McLeod, who's the head of service for the South in the city, but he was a PE teacher, and he was also the national specialist for PE that specialised in outdoor education when he was a schools inspector. So good guy to come along to speak to you about all this.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And now a bit more about our littlies that have just started, and maybe the other wee littlies in primary 2 and stuff. Are younger children able to share play resources then? And also, will they get reading books home like normally happens?
I think that the answer to that should be yes, in time. So there is a limit to how much children can use just their own set when they are 4 and 5 years old. And at the start of term anyway, it's really about routines, isn't it? It's about getting used to school and getting those routines. And we have said to schools that just now, in this kind of recovery phase, there should be more intervals. So I would expect a playtime in the morning and a lunch and a playtime in the afternoon, so that we get children out, that they're not restricted, because the way that's been recommended is that the children sit in rows. And they are just so used to sitting in groups and being social little creatures. So let's get that out with staggered different playtimes and that kind of thing. So I think in time, as we grow in confidence, we are still very keen that learning through play is a major part of what our children do, and that by its necessity, they must share. So we come back to that my exponential curve, where the younger you are, the lower the risk that comes.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I should have realised and put these questions together. I do apologise. You can tell I've been working all day. It's a bit about funding for outdoor learning. I suppose if you know, different schools have different resources, is there any additional funding being put aside for outdoor learning?
There's not this year. There hasn't been any. In previous years, we have heavily invested in outdoor learning. We are investing in our nurseries in more outdoor wear for the children and for the staff, so that they are able to go out more. Not all the staff are as excited about that as me, but a very big coat to wear, and it's very warm.
And some waterproof wellies, I think, possibly is what they need.
Wellies too. So we have set aside budget for our nurseries for outdoor clothing, but in the past we have supported, and our schools are very good at sourcing funding from a whole range of places.
Absolutely.
And we're very flexible about pupil equity funding.
Brilliant. Okay, so this is the last one for me in this round as well. And I suppose it was just about, is there scope for one-to-one support for any child who really was struggling and needed additional help for whatever reason? I think it was great what you said there, Maureen, that everyone's got additional support needs at some point in their learning, and maybe children who wouldn't have come under the radar might now.
So that's the whole idea in that phase 4 of the recovery plan, that it's targeted support. Whether it's one-to-one or whether it's in small groups, and that's for the school to decide. And that's why we're looking at this additionality come the end of August, to look to see and then start to kind of raise our expectations about what's being done with that additionality. Is it providing flexibility? In some cases, it may just be providing backfill for a teacher who is having to self-isolate. I mean, let's get real here. That might be part and parcel of what we're just going to have to wear. But if that self-isolation is shorter term, and I know some of our heads are a little bit frustrated that they've not got supply, they've not been able to access supply at this point, and we've said, well, use your additionality, and they said, oh, well, I've got it targeted for small groups and that kind of thing. But we're hoping to get to that stage. There won't be enough for one teacher for every primary school or for every secondary school, but we're looking to target so that everybody has some additionality.
Great, thanks for that, Maureen. I think it's back over to Kimberly again.
Okay, brilliant. So just with there being many adjustments within the schools that we've kind of covered on, so like the cleaning, signage, obviously the new cashless system and everything that's been set up, some parents have just asked some questions around the school budgets and the processes for that. So the first one we've kind of spoke about was, will there be some additional funding from the government, and how will this be used? So I know you mentioned that there was 5 million, that doesn't go very far by the sounds of it.
Purely for teachers.
Yep.
So we've received some additional funding for teachers. We've received some additional funding for the enhanced cleaning. The schools have still got their pupil equity funding, and remember that they were off for 5 months. So there is some slippage in there. So that gives them additional, but there's nothing over and above that. I mean, our schools we get an extra 20 million on pupil equity funding that goes direct out to schools.
Amazing. Okay. And since pupils have been out of school for nearly 6 months, and it will take some of them some weeks, maybe even months to adjust back in, will there be talks again with the SQA to change the date? So I think you've said they are already looking at sliding that. Yep, so we'll look to slide that.
Yep.
Okay. Our next one, and this one is about the hand hygiene procedure. So we've just got, is there a standard number of times a day the children should be cleaning their hands whilst they're within the school? And how would the school manage this, which I can imagine is a nightmare for teachers at the moment?
There is no set number. What they say is regular hand washing. So as you come into the school, every time you've been to the toilet, and if you go outside, wash your hands before you go, wash your hands when you come back in again. So just that kind of, wash your hands before you go to lunch, wash your hands when you come back from lunch. So that, and I know that some parents feel that might be a little bit too much. That it might cause difficulties, dermatitis and that kind of thing. But the scientific advice says that is the best way to keep this virus at bay.
Okay, brilliant. And just sort of touching on the cashless system that we've got obviously in the interim at the moment. So I know there's not a sort of weekly refund or anything being given. Obviously, the balance will just carry over from what's now been clarified. But parents are just asking, moving forward, and if we get to the end of the school year and they'd overpaid, which is a while away, would there then be an option for a refund?
Good question. Well, the trick would be that they know how many and they just don't buy.
To manage the balance.
Manage the balance. Because it's just administratively, it's just to take the money out of public funds, and backs it back. Actually, it's just so bureaucratic. It's going from a parent into the council is quite straightforward, but we have to track the public pound coming back. And, you know, to refund £2.50 costs about a tenner in terms of office time. So just keep track of them. Keep track of them every term.
This can be the parents in the whole cycle. If they keep track of this, then it will hopefully smooth along other aspects of it.
Yeah.
Okay, and have you got any plans in place longer term for a cashless system, like maybe through an app or something? I know some other areas have got things in place that's been ongoing.
I've been here for 12 and a half years, and that's what we've been striving to do. Honestly, anyway, hey ho. So yes, parent pay, parent portal. That's the whole idea, is that you get that system. The challenge with that, as I have repeatedly discovered, is A, the IT system, and B, just making that secure, because it has to be so secure, and on the kind of public money funding, that is hard when there's so many hackers out there.
I can imagine.
I hope we might have that one day before I leave.
We'll get there. And the next one I didn't even know was an option. So it was with the government initiative for the Eats Out to Help Out being incorporated into some local authorities. Why are Glasgow schools not taking part in this?
So we looked at it, and it only runs Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So we would get 6 days out of it. At half price is £5.70 per parent, per child. That's what it would be. It's only the paying parents. So we have a huge number of free school meals. Plus, we are the only authority in Scotland that provides universal free school meals for primary 4 at a cost of £2 million. And you have to apply to the government. You have to record everybody that it takes, and the administration of that, it's £5.70. Our meals are much cheaper than other authorities. So East Renfrewshire are doing it. There's East Ayrshire, their meals are more of a cost. And the other bit was that it would increase the number of children potentially using the lunches in the crush hall. And so just on balance, see, when I got to the £5.70, I was like, whoa.
It's not worth it. I didn't even think it would be an option in schools, so there you go.
£5.70, no, sorry.
No way.
I know and that would be important to some parents. I'm really sorry. But we gave you 110 for a clothing grant, 80 for the free school meals for the summer. Honestly, we're
trying to find a balance, isn't it?
And we've given out the clothing grants this year are up 2,000 people extra. So we're now at over 34,000.
I know there's been a lot of families that have found themselves in different situations this year, I think, to the previous years. So we're back to you, Martina.
Thank you very much. And these set of questions on health and well-being, Maureen, as well, which obviously is something that we really have to think about now as people are coming back. So one of the first question is, when we wait for mental health face-to-face services to return and resume in schools, what services are available in the meantime?
So, as you know, as a nurturing city, we have nurture at the heart of what we do. We have our psychological services. We still have a school counselling service. And some of that school counselling service may be done online. We've signed up for Big White Wall for 10,000 for young people who are over 16, and that's online support. So Barry Syme, who leads our psychological services, and it may be that you want to invite Barry Syme along to one of your to talk about the counselling service and the kinds of strategies that we have for mental health. We feel very strongly that we shouldn't be relying on specialist services, that it should be much more a holistic offer that we give, and certainly that's a lot of the work that we've been doing.
Absolutely, thank you. This next one is, will there be an allowance for additional support staff in schools to help with playground supervision and first aid incidents? I suppose it's just about, will there be additional staff available for those kind of things?
Well, we have been recruiting additional support for learning staff, additional staff. That was last year, and it was kind of interrupted. It's not necessarily to do first aid or for additional supervision, because actually, I'm not sure the children need additional supervision. It's just about spacing themselves out in the playground. But you know, additional staff are always very welcome, I'm sure.
Absolutely, and this one is something close to my heart, because the school that my son goes to actually does this. It's about the daily mile walk, and talking about PE and how important PE is, and if there's some issues with outdoor learning, whatever it is, they're saying should it be compulsory that all schools sign up to the daily mile walk?
Oh, see, I hate compulsory things.
I know, me too, but I have to ask the question.
No, I don't think anything should be compulsory. I think we have a PPAS team, so that's physical education, physical activity and school sport. Our active school coordinators are outstanding, and they do loads of work across the city. We've been working with Inspiring Scotland for the last 3 years to have increased physical activity and working with third sector. So third sector come in and work on physical activity, and that has been absolutely outstanding. And I realise I'm beginning to look darker and darker.
I saw that, yeah.
I know. It must be getting very dark, cloudy outside.
I think it might be over to you, Kimberly, again anyway. We're nearly through them all.
I know, we're getting
You'll
there.
be glad to know, Maureen, you're nearly at the end of this.
You've made it back. So our next ones are just round about the transport side of things. So just our education services and talks with First Bus at the moment on increasing buses at peak services during the sort of school run, as they would have sort of pre-COVID, but I know obviously they are facing major limitations as well.
Yeah, we have been talking to First Bus and in some cases disagreeing with them. And in one part of the city, we rely on a service bus coming that they have withdrawn. And we've actually put on a double-decker for 20 children. So 20 children are entitled to free school transport, and we've put on a double-decker because normally the children would get on the service bus. And we're going to review that come October, because obviously that costs a fortune. But that's part of our discussions with First Bus to see if we can get them moving along a little bit. So yeah, we are in constant talks with them.
Brilliant. And for the schools that find a lot of parents are dropping off with cars and they find that quite dangerous, I know there was some schools trialling out the sort of no car zones. Is there any plans to sort of roll that out further across the city?
Absolutely, and I just got all the packs today. So Neighbourhoods and Sustainability, Councillors Richardson and Councillor Cunningham are very, very keen that we roll this out. And you can do it under, actually I don't know the legislation, something to do with road orders. And we've got 21 more schools that they have identified. But what we need to do was, I felt that doing this in August, on top of asking the head teachers to take everybody back in, it was just like too
much.
And what we need to do is engage with parents and engage with staff, because when that road stops being used, the staff, if there's a school car park, staff get access to the car park. So they would have to come early in the morning, much earlier, to get in, or park outside of the zone and walk in. And I think we should give them a little bit of engagement and a little bit of warning on that before we do that. And I would quite like to see an evaluation of the 6 that we had it in, to see how it worked and what went well, because it doesn't work everywhere. You know, I know there was some schools that were very keen on it, but it's a bus route. So
it's just possible.
We just can't do that. So there are 21 other ones that we're planning to take forward. So I thought kind of engagement mid-September, with the view to kind of end of September into October starting them.
Brilliant. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's saying that some children from different households have been sharing taxi transport to school. This has been making some of the kids feel quite uncomfortable, the fact that they're put together in such small spaces for a significant period of time. So I think this is the ones that education services pay, obviously, to get the kids to school.
Yeah, so we can't possibly provide individual taxis for every child. And we've had a small number of complaints in where parents and carers have asked for hackneys rather than cars. Unfortunately, hackneys have a number of hacks have withdrawn because they were notoriously not good at coming up when it was school run time. Some of them were fantastic, absolutely, but it was inconsistent. So we have reverted to some cars as well. And it's well within the transport rules about mixing. There's escorts in there too, but it is what they previously travelled in a hackney, and there was maybe 3 different children in a hack, but they felt that there was a bit more space as opposed to sitting on a back seat. People in a row. That's where their issue lies.
Okay, no worries. And we go back over to Martina.
And this is some just miscellaneous questions that don't fall under any particular category, Maureen, but we'll kind of split through them, and you'll be glad to know that most of them you've covered already anyway. But the first one is, and with quite a few concerned messages asking why pupils are being told to eat their lunch outside even on rainy days.
Well, I suppose I'd need the specifics on that. I don't think there's any rule about eating your pieces outside. I think it and in the rain does seem a bit extreme, doesn't it? I would suggest the parent where that's happened and it's become a problem gets in touch.
Yes, thank you very much. And the next one is about homework. And will children be given homework this term? And if so, will there be a limit on what items are brought home from the school? Will it be done via an app? Will it be done via, the online learning like we did before?
So probably yes and yes. So yes, at some point homework will be given. Yes, it will be limited potentially, and where possible, certainly in the senior phase, it would be done online, where they could. So I think homework is an essential part of learning, without a shadow of a doubt, but it just needs to be managed safely. And there are ways that it can be done. You know, teachers don't have to collect in the homework jotters and mark them all personally. You can build that into the learning, so they can do a little bit of homework and then they come into school and it's marked, as a class. So it doesn't have to be, and it's that issue of, the worries about cross-contamination and children bringing COVID from home. So
Absolutely.
you just have to manage that carefully and make sure that children get good, valuable learning opportunities.
Thank you, fantastic. I think this one's about buddy schemes for primary ones, and I know that happens in a lot of schools, and just is that going to be happening again? Because it helps younger ones' confidence, particularly wee ones that maybe just need that wee bit of extra confidence in schools. Yes. Is there a plan for that?
Yeah, my understanding is that is still taking place, and certainly I was in one secondary recently where, it was absolutely between senior pupils and S1.
And what about for primary school pupils? Do you know if that, if there's, as well? Okay, thank you.
There is no reason why that shouldn't be taking place.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think you touched on this for nurseries, but I think this is about schools, so I will raise this. Will there be support from schools to offer families a bit of extra funding if they need to get outdoor appropriate clothing for children? I know a lot of primary schools are outside, some high schools are outside, and they need waterproof trousers or a waterproof jacket. Will there be any additional funding for that?
So we've used, we don't have extra funding for that. I mean, pupil equity funding could be used for that. I know it's not an elastic fund that just keeps on growing and just adding things into the list there. We don't have additional funds for that. Our schools are very good at supporting families in terms of outdoor clothing, and they have lots of, I've been in fabulous schools where there's racks of outdoor clothes miraculously appear, and also equally miraculously go home with children. completely.
Absolutely.
So
Sorry, I'm having a
that
problem
nobody
with
is
my internet.
identified.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think this one is an interesting one as well, but there's a question here saying, are teachers having conversations in school with senior pupils about the risks of not social distancing outside the school, just to make them aware of the risks?
I think everybody's having conversations with young
I think they are.
people about the importance of social distancing outside of school.
I know, I think they must be getting a wee bit of tired. Well, not would be fed up with it, but a tad, yeah. Okay, this is an interesting one, and I know that this happens in my workplace. I go into my workplace twice a week now. Why are temperature checks upon entry to schools not being used? Sorry, can you hear me, Maureen? I'm kind of breaking up a wee bit.
No, I missed the end of that.
Temperature checks. Why are temperature checks not being used on entry into schools?
Why are temperature checks not being taken?
Why they
So
not?
it's just the logistics of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the other bit is that temperature, children's and adults' temperatures spike for a whole range of reasons. You know, women of a certain age, women before they, girls and women before they ovulate, have a temperature spike.
Okay.
Children have temperature spikes for little ear infections, or that come and go. So it's not the most reliable method for us. And the logistics of it, can you imagine taking a temperature every day as children come into school? And what do? Stand over there with the hot sweaties, stand over there? No, it could just be ghastly.
Stand with the hot sweaties all the time, I think, just now, actually.
And I think it's quite intimidating, because it's like a gun that they're holding to your head when you go into work. They're like pointing this gun at you. So I can imagine some kids would have the fear of going to school with it as well.
So we've got 2 questions left, Maureen, and we'll keep them brief, if that's all right. So I think we've probably covered this a bit. There's a wee bit that I think maybe needs a wee bit more clarification. If students and staff develop any symptoms, will they be required to... Oh, can you not hear me? Sorry, my internet is going in and out. I do apologise. Can you hear me now?
I missed the end of the question.
Oh, sorry. Okay, it's about if students and staff develop any symptoms, will they be required
to... So if a member of staff develops symptoms...
or a student, will they be required to submit a negative COVID test before they return to school?
Oh, we wouldn't require them to, because that's confidential medical information, isn't it? Sure. We would hope that they would willingly share it with us. And if they test positive, then Test and Protect kicks in, and the school would be contacted. But if they're negative, our expectation is they come straight back to work. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and I should think so. And last but not least as well, you'll be glad to hear, given that COVID symptoms in children seem to include sickness and gastrointestinal symptoms, will you require children with these symptoms to have a COVID test before returning, or remain off school for longer than 48 hours? Because I know what people usually say, if they've got an upset tummy and they're sick, don't send your kids back for 48 hours. But because that could be an indication of COVID, would you expect them to have a test as well as that?
So again, we can't require, we can only recommend, and I think that's back to probably where we started tonight, which was about we need to get better information out about it. And we're getting, there's loads of tests going on. I understand at Glasgow Airport on Monday there was 1,000 COVID tests carried out. I don't know how many was it, an astounding number, wasn't it? So I think that whilst we don't require it, we need to have a think about how we communicate with parents about the importance of that. And there's not, with norovirus, it was, it was always the 48-hour thing, but it might be that they just have a high temperature, you give them the Calpol, it comes back down again. It's when that temperature is sustained is when we don't want the children coming back in. But I think on the whole, I have to say parents are being very, very good about it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that, Maureen. I think that's our final question.